Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Following last night's AEW Dynamite on TNT, we have a ton of AEW news to get to, so let's get straight into the news following last night's AEW Dynamite and everything in the world of All Elite Wrestling right now. The thing that everyone, of course, is talking about coming out of Dynamite last night is the news about Jon Moxley and Renee Young. They are expecting their first child. Yes, this was a huge surprise, not like anyone would know anyway, but it was a huge surprise in the way that it was announced. If anything, it was very in line with Jon Moxley and Renee Young's relationship, the way it was announced on Dynamite last night. But the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley did announce that his wife Renee Young is expecting a child. Now, this was announced during a promo on Dynamite. Moxley was cutting a promo backstage about his upcoming World Championship defense against Kenny Omega on the December 2nd episode of Dynamite, and he described his hectic schedule, and he actually told a story about receiving some advice from his father when he was younger, who told him that they were, quote, the good guys, and told him about how he had to navigate through all of his responsibilities, and this was an important life lesson for Moxley growing up. Now, within all of this story, he mentioned about all of his responsibilities right now, including being the world champion, wrestling, and then within all of that, he just briefly mentioned that he had a pregnant wife at home, which everyone just stopped and went, what? Did he just say he had a pregnant wife at home? And he then said, quote, and now the whole world is bearing down on me. My body feels like hell and I can't even get out of bed in the morning. I have a pregnant wife at home. I'm holding 2 titles on 2 different continents. I got challenges coming from every which way. What do? I know what to do. We're the good guys. So after that promo, I think everyone just went, is that real? Is that legit? Was that just a line throwing? But it is legitimate because, as Tony Schiavone mentioned on commentary, Moxley just about buried the lead when it came to this exciting news. But as I mentioned, given the relationship and marriage between Moxley and Renee Young, given how low-key their relationship is, and even the way they got married previously was very quiet and very hush-hush, it's no surprise that they would announce that they're expecting their first child in a very similar way. So given the quiet nature of his marriage to Renee Young, it's not completely out of the norm and out of the ordinary, but this will be Jon Moxley and Renee Young's first child together. Now, obviously, I think everyone knows the history of Jon Moxley and Renee Young. The couple first met in WWE. They were quietly married in 2017, but now both people are now no longer with the WWE. Moxley has found huge success in AEW, joining them in 2019 after departing WWE earlier that year. While Renee Young, she previously worked, of course, for the WWE for something like 7 years. She left the company earlier this summer, and she's got a lot of stuff going on as well. She just recently announced the launch of her new podcast. We know she's got a cookbook coming out. She also announced on Twitter over the last few hours that she's going to start on Twitch soon, and she's expecting the birth of her first child with Jon Moxley soon. So there is so much going on in the world of Renee Young and Jon Moxley, and it's just very heartwarming news, isn't it? Everyone has been flooding social media and Renee Young with heartfelt messages of support and congratulations. Obviously, I pass on my congratulations, like that mean anything, but it's just very exciting and very happy news. You've got all members of the Shield are now going to be parents. Of course, Roman Reigns was already a parent, and he actually had twins once again earlier this year. You've got Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. They're soon to become parents very soon. They think in the next couple of weeks or so. And now you have Jon Moxley also is going to be a father as well. Now, some of the weird comments. I mentioned this yesterday. We did a video yesterday with some WWE news, and we spoke about I spoke about Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins. Of course, Becky Lynch shared those pregnancy photos on her Instagram, and I kind of mentioned at the time, do I really want to talk about it? Should I talk about it? The reason I was hesitant at the time is because people are really creepy, especially pro wrestling fans. That fandom is so intense and so strong that people can be really creepy and really odd, and just we've seen some absolute horror stories, haven't we, when it comes to pro wrestling, and legitimately, no joking around, scary stories when it comes to the fandom of pro wrestling. And I mentioned even in the last couple of weeks or so, even Deonna Purrazzo mentioned that people send letters to her house, her personal address. Where did they find that? Where did they get all that information from? It's terrifying. And I saw some creepy messages when it came to this as well. Obviously, you saw the almost slightly comical ones going, I can't believe you've actually taken Jon Moxley and he's now the father of a child, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, well, there are some weird people out there. I saw some absolutely horrific takes on it going, WWE would be absolutely furious that Jon Moxley and Renee Young have announced the upcoming birth of their child on an AEW show. Oh, come on. Really? I think this is a bit bigger than WWE versus AEW. I think this is a bit bigger than ratings or anything of that nature. Just be happy for the couple. They're expecting the birth of their first child. It's amazing news. It's tremendous news. We don't know. There hasn't been any details about the due date of Renee Young. As I mentioned, she's got a podcast that she's launching soon, so I'm sure she'll probably give some details about that on there, along with the launch of her Twitch streaming channel. So we're going to get a lot of information from Renee Young soon, if she wants to share it. It's the same as I mentioned with Becky Lynch yesterday. When it comes to things like this, when it comes to private matters, personal matters, it's information that can be shared if they want to share it. It's up to them. It's their news. It's their birth of their child. It's their family. They can do what they want. So I think as a fan base, we should just be very happy and very excited that their family is growing. I think eventually, of course, people are already looking to the future, saying that eventually it will mean that Jon Moxley is going to take some time off from AEW eventually. We know that Seth Rollins, after Survivor Series, is going to be gone from WWE for about 4 or 5 weeks, I would say maybe 6 weeks, certainly into 2021, with the birth of his first child of Becky Lynch. He's going to be going on paternity leave, and of course that means Jon Moxley will be the same whenever Renee Young eventually does give birth to their child. So I think that's probably quite a while away, you would like to think, at least about 6 months or so. But eventually Jon Moxley will be taking some time off from AEW to help with the birth of their child. So that's a long way away, but it's something to consider in the future, obviously. And you have to think of what a year it's been for Renee Young, really has. She decides to leave the WWE, as I mentioned, in the summer. She made her last appearance at SummerSlam on camera, and the kickoff show really was, she was the mean Gene of this generation. She really was, and I don't think anyone would argue with that. She really was. She became bigger than just an announcer. She became bigger than just an interviewer. She was the first female color commentator on Monday Night Raw, first full-time woman color commentator in WWE. You can kind of maybe say Beth Phoenix before that. Nevertheless, Renee Young did that first. And she was more than just an interviewer. She was a TV host. WWE Backstage was built around her, talking smack. She just did it all. She did it all, and I think I mentioned at the time it was actually the right thing for her to do, to leave WWE, because she'd almost outgrown it. There was no position there for her because she couldn't just be a commentator anymore. She couldn't just be an interviewer. She was bigger than that. And she stepped away from WWE, I think, for a variety of reasons. As I mentioned, because of the positions available. I think she wanted greater flexibility. I think she wanted more opportunities. And look what happens as soon as she leaves. She's now running her own life. She's on her own schedule. She's got a podcast coming out, a cookbook, Twitch, she's starting a family. It's absolutely tremendous news, and it should only serve as an inspiration that you can take control of your own destiny. There isn't a company like WWE that can tell you what to do, control your life and your narrative, and you can do whatever you want. And it's, 2020 has been a horrible year for news. It's been a year of really sort of depressing news, to be honest. But there have been some nice bright spots that include Becky Lynch's pregnancy and now Renee Young. So what nice news as we head into the end of the year. So as I mentioned, congratulations to them both. What was interesting, though, was Jon Moxley did this promo, but then he actually got laid out last night. He was going to have the contract signing with Kenny Omega to sign the contract for their match on December 2nd for the AEW World Championship at Dynamite. We had Kenny Omega come out first. He was in suit and shades, but Jon Moxley's music played and he didn't show up. We then get a camera backstage, and we see that Jon Moxley was completely knocked out. He's backstage with medical staff. They're checking on him. The group agrees they need to get him out of here. And now Tony Schiavone, who was in the ring with Kenny Omega, asked Omega, did you have anything to do with that? Omega says he's not for physical stuff. Last time it was an elbow, now a bloody nose. Omega says that Moxley isn't avoiding this one, and he says winter is coming, and so is he. Signed the contract and left. So obviously there is something going on there. I think this is just cementing the Kenny Omega cleaner heel turn that is coming, or in the process of coming. So exciting for that one, but it does raise the question, what's going to happen now when it comes to Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley in December? We'll touch on that in a second. But more news on Renee Young's pregnancy announcement. This is very interesting, was that Renee Young shared a story about this pregnancy and the news in how a WWE superstar, a current WWE superstar, found out about their pregnancy. Renee Young accidentally told WWE superstar Bayley about her pregnancy when she meant to text the news to her husband, Jon Moxley. Now, as I just mentioned, Moxley revealed during a promo on Dynamite that he and Renee Young are expecting their first child together. Renee Young reacted to the announcement with an Instagram photo, and Bayley responded to that tweet revealing this interesting story. Bayley said, quote, "What's cuter, the way the world found out tonight or the way I found out?" Renee Young responded and revealed she meant to text Moxley the pregnancy update, but accidentally texted Bayley instead. Renee Young said, quote, "100% the way you found out. I thought I was texting John a pregnancy update. I was in fact texting at It's Bayley WWE." So it was just it's a very fun story. It's a light-hearted story. You know, it's still an interesting bit of news. AEW President and CEO Tony Khan also congratulated the happy couple. He said it's the best news that AEW has ever broken on Dynamite. Khan wrote, quote, that rhymes. He said, quote, "Congratulations to Renee Young and Jon Moxley. This is the best news we've ever broken on hashtag AEW Dynamite." As I mentioned, there's no word yet on the due date of Renee Young and Jon Moxley's child, but once we hear that news, I'm sure it will be shared and everyone will probably do a story on that as well. As I mentioned once again, congratulations to both Moxley and Renee Young. Before people say this, and this is something I probably wanted to mention as well, because I do think it's worth discussing. A lot of people have said, well, this means Renee Young's coming to AEW, right? Renee Young, she's definitely going to come into AEW. I don't think so. I just can't see that happening, especially now that she is pregnant. I don't think that means Renee Young is coming in or anything like that. I certainly don't think it's a storyline. I know everyone thinks, oh, things are a work. It isn't a work, and I don't think Renee Young is coming into AEW. As I mentioned, she has a million other projects going on at the moment, whether it is a podcast, a cookbook, Twitch, and now being pregnant on top of that. She doesn't have time to go into AEW. Maybe, you know, an occasional rare on camera. Maybe she might even be in the crowd for the match against Kenny Omega. I don't know, but I don't think she's going to come into AEW full time. She's not going to become an announcer or anything like that, or a manager. I just can't see that happening. In terms of Moxley versus Kenny Omega in a few weeks' time, you know, I don't think this necessarily means Jon Moxley will lose to Kenny Omega. I've seen some people reacting saying, well, this means Jon Moxley's going to lose because he's immediately going to take time off. As I mentioned, we don't know the time frame. We don't know the time frame of the pregnancy or anything like that. So to say that Jon Moxley immediately is going to take time off, I think is very, very rash. I don't think that is going to happen at all. What I will say is I do think Kenny Omega will win. And now I'll probably save this for a future video, but I do think Kenny Omega will win. I've said for a while now that I think the next AEW World Champion will be Kenny Omega. And I think it will be in line with this fully cemented heel turn by Omega that they've kind of been teasing ever since All Out back in August. So I think Kenny Omega will be the next world champion. I think Jon Moxley will lose the AEW World Championship, but I don't think Moxley is going to disappear from AEW television anytime soon. He's probably, with Jericho, the biggest star they've got on the show right now. Certainly with Jericho, the biggest ratings draw. So I don't think Moxley is going anywhere off of television, off of AEW television anytime soon. So I'm really excited for the match though. I think the match they had at Full Gear in 2019 was way over the top. It was I think gratuitous violence and went on way too long. But considering this is just going to be your standard wrestling match, something that they haven't done in AEW, I'm really excited for it. And I do think they had great chemistry. It does feel like a big match, and it's something I'm really excited for. So excited and can't wait for December the 2nd when these two guys face off for the World Championship. But another interesting and major news story coming out of Dynamite last night was a shocking heel turn as Will Hobbs in the main event angle turned heel and joined Team Taz. Now in the main event of last night's edition of AEW Dynamite, FTW champion Brian Cage and Ricky Starks of Team Taz defeated the new AEW TNT champion Darby Allin and the former AEW TNT champion Cody Rhodes in the main event of the show. Cage landed an avalanche drill claw on Darby Allin for the victory, but it was the major news after the match, because after the match Team Taz continued to beat up their opponents until Will Hobbs ran out with a chair and chased the group to the floor. Hobbs noticed Cage had left the FTW Championship in the ring. He then picked it up, smiling at the group, And Taz had been attempting to recruit Will Hobbs for several weeks to join Team Taz, but weeks had gone by and it didn't look like Will Hobbs was interested. But as Cody Rhodes got up to thank Will Hobbs, the AEW upstart turned around and smashed Cody Rhodes with the championships, effectively joining Team Taz in the process. As the show came to a close, Taz yelled into the camera, quote, "We're just getting started." Now, it was certainly a heel turn that I didn't think most people saw coming. I really didn't see it coming. I liked it. I did like it. I'm a big fan of Will Hobbs. I think he's got a ton of potential. I think a really big and interesting factor in Will Hobbs is that he's not a WWE guy. And we've seen it with Darby Allin, and I think that's why so many people were excited when Darby Allin won the TNT Championship at Full Gear, was that he's a WWE guy. I know they've appeared in other places, Evolve and all this kind of stuff, but it's not a guy that's been on the main stage of WWE. And if you look at the past mistakes of companies like back in the day, TNA, I know I'm a big Impact guy, but they made this mistake, and the same with WCW, and even AEW they've been walking the razor blade with this one, to be honest, is that you need to make these homegrown stars. You need to make these homegrown stars, and you need to make them into stars and make them stick. That's how you differentiate yourself from WWE. Now, I'm not one of those people that says, oh, you can't have people that used to work for WWE, or you can't have former WWE superstars in the main event, because look, it's 2020. WWE has been around with zero competition pretty much since WCW closed down. I know Impact came, and maybe they'll come back one day, but you get my point. Since 2001, there has been no major competition to WWE. So that's nearly 20 years of a company monopolizing the business and having no competition. So of course, everyone is going to at some point have worked for WWE. It's almost inevitable at this point, especially now with their development system and NXT and the Performance Center. The amount of people they have under contract is larger than ever before. Well, maybe in 2019 prior to the pandemic, but you understand my point. It's impossible in 2020 to sign people that they've never worked for WWE. Of course, there are people out there, but my point being, you can't criticize people, oh, they work for WWE, so they can't work for AEW. That just isn't the case. That's just nonsensical, really. So I will give people a bit of slack on that one, but I do think it is important where you can to find these guys that haven't worked for WWE on the big stage, like a Will Hobbs. See that, okay, this guy has a ton of potential, he has size, he has the look, he can be a main event level guy. This is a guy we can build up. He can be a homegrown talent. He's a guy we can build up into a main event level star, and he's a guy that we can say is an AEW guy. He's a guy that wasn't in the WWE. He's a guy that we built and we've elevated, like Darby Allin. I know AEW didn't make Darby Allin, but they've elevated him, and he hasn't been in WWE, and he can be an AEW guy. I would consider Darby Allin now to be an AEW guy, and they can do the same when it comes to Will Hobbs. So I wasn't against this at all. He's, like I said, a huge man. He's great in the ring. I think ever since All Out, where he was in the Battle Royal, people really start to take notice of him there, and there's obviously something there. There is obviously something there when it comes to potential, ability in the ring, certainly look. I don't know about his ability to cut a promo and his ability to talk on the mic. That might be an area for improvement. If that is the case, what do you need? You need a mouthpiece. And who is a better mouthpiece than Taz? Taz is absolutely perfect for that. I think Taz, a real nice element of having Taz in AEW. I think initially people just thought he's just going to be a commentator again, which is fine. I think Taz is a fine commentator. He's a good commentator. Obviously, his time with WWE for all those years, I thought he was great on SmackDown. Let's not talk about ECW. But then his time in TNA and Impact, he was fine. I think he kind of lost his edge towards the end there, and that obviously you could tell that he maybe was just taking a paycheck there. But when he came into AEW, again, people were happy because they like Taz on commentary, and he does a good job. And people like his work on Dark, even if it is very comical, like they're not even on the air. And I'm sure he'll be involved in the second AEW show on TNT whenever it launches, and I think that's the reason he came in. But what I really liked about having Taz in AEW is that he got to be the Taz of old. He got to be the Taz of old that cut promos in ECW. And people almost forget that because of his time in WWE, that one, he was incredible in the ring. When he was healthy, prior to having the broken neck, he was incredible. But two, his promo ability is unmatched. When Taz is PO'd, and when he has fire in his belly, and when he believes in something, not many people can cut a better promo than Taz. And he's proved that a lot of the times in AEW. So to have that person that has... he can be a mouthpiece for Will Hobbs is fantastic. I think in the development of Will Hobbs, that is going to be real crucial for him. And, the whole Team Taz faction in AEW, it's okay. It's okay. I wouldn't say it's the best faction they've got, and certainly sometimes the faction doesn't make the most sense. I think it's been really beneficial for someone like Ricky Starks. I think it's absolutely elevated someone like Ricky Starks, and I think Ricky Starks has done a fantastic job. And coming into AEW, I would have said that Ricky Starks doesn't need a mouthpiece, because if you'd seen his work in NWA, on NWA Power, you know that he can cut a fantastic promo, and he really doesn't need a mouthpiece, but I think he's been elevated just by the association of Taz. I think Brian Cage, he needed a mouthpiece as well. I think he can cut a promo, but his promo skills aren't, elite level, pun intended, and I think Taz works out really nicely for him there. It does seem like a slightly odd faction that's put together of just random people, like there are very contrasting personalities there and different looks, but it has potential. I like the feeling of it being less of a stable, more of sort of an MMA sort of kind of family kind of deal, or a coaching team, that Team Taz deal. I think that's what they're going with there, and it has potential. It has potential, and look, AEW, it's the land of the factions, isn't it? You've got Team Taz, the Nightmare Family, the Inner Circle, the Elite, Death Triangle, the Family. There's a ton of factions there. It's faction warfare, and that's very inspired by wrestling in Japan. It's very New Japan inspired, where you've got a ton of factions there. And that's like the real world of the likes of MMA. You've got tons of different training facilities and training families and factions, Team Alpha Male, whatever that's called, and all these other stuff. So, was it Top Team, whatever it's called? I'm not massively versed on my MMA, but my point being that you've got all these different factions, all of these different training elements, and I think that's fun. I think that's a unique way. Like I said, very inspired by New Japan. And I'm not against it. I like factions. I've always liked factions in pro wrestling. If you look back into the Attitude Era, again, that was another time, ton of factions, and I liked it. It does add this element of chaos, and eventually you have these factions face off, and it's a lot of fun to watch. Now, speaking of factions facing off, last night on Dynamite, we saw Death Triangle reuniting. Now, after being away for 8 months from AEW, Pac won his return match against The Blade on last night's edition of Dynamite. Post-match, Blade and the Butcher ambushed Pac as he was about to cut a promo on Eddie Kingston, while Kingston was on commentary for the match. But out came Rey Fenix to make an attempted save, followed by Penta El Zero Miedo, who also had a chair in hand. Now, Eddie Kingston's family initially thought that Penta was on their side and waited for him to take out Rey Fenix, but instead of attacking his brother, he swung for Eddie Kingston and chased the family off. Phoenix, Pac, and Penta then stood together in the ring as they reunited their stable Death Triangle. Of course, the group Death Triangle had only just started to get going earlier in the year, but the current pandemic kept Pac outside of the US, so the stable had to be put on the shelf until now. At the time, when they came together, I don't think it was just an example of another faction coming together. There were rumours that we were going to get trios championships. We were going to get, a bit like in Ring of Honor, we were going to get the 6-man tag team championships, and that's why Death Triangle was brought in. They were going to be feuding with the likes of Jurassic Express. So this does go along with the reports with Death Triangle reuniting. This goes along with reports that said that Death Triangle would face the family going forward. We would have Pac and the Lucha Brothers facing off against Eddie Kingston, Blade, and the Butcher. Of course, it's great to see Pac back. Obviously, when he returned last week, there was, I don't want to say criticism. Everyone was happy to see Pac back. I think people criticised Tony Khan's tweets. But I'm really glad we saw Death Triangle reunite here, because we just didn't get the chance to see them earlier this year. I think they were only together for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We really didn't get them to see them do all that much, apart from I think they attacked Jurassic Express and attacked the Best Friends. I think that was about it. And while I did enjoy see Death Triangle reunite last night, I will say I did really enjoy Eddie Kingston's family faction. And a bit like Team Taz, it seemed like such an odd and bizarre faction at the start. Eddie Kingston, Blade, Butcher, the Lucha Brothers. It just seemed odd and really thrown together. And I think a lot of people went, oh, that's such a weird mix of people. But he really made it work. He really made that sort of we're all different, but we can come together and be one. And he did make it work, Eddie Kingston. I think credit to him. He made it work so much that he got an AEW World Championship match, main event at a pay-per-view against Jon Moxley. That's how well Eddie Kingston made that work. So I enjoyed it, but I'm not devastated to see the Death Triangle back together. I think they deserve a run. They deserve a chance to see what we missed. I would have been really annoyed just that that whole thing had been dropped and we never went back to it. So I think it's interesting that the Lucha Brothers are now cool again. Despite last week in the main event of Dynamite, they nearly killed each other. And in addition to that, even worse, ripped each other's masks off during the match. So it'll be interesting to see going forward if they're completely on the same page. You also had Eddie Kingston keep mentioning that Penta was his best friend several times last week. So we've seen one betrayal on Dynamite with the whole Will Hobbs thing. I wouldn't rule out another one in the future when it comes to Penta maybe rejoining the family. Nevertheless, I enjoyed the match. I enjoyed seeing Pac back, and I enjoyed seeing Death Triangle being put back together. I think it's time we see if that whole thing can work, and I'm really excited for that. Now, finally, of course, last night, one of the big exciting things heading into Dynamite was the Inner Circle going to Las Vegas. Yes, the Inner Circle took on Las Vegas, and we saw multiple cameos during these segments where the Inner Circle hit Las Vegas last night. Now, during last night's episode of Dynamite, the Inner Circle made their way to Las Vegas thanks to their newest member, MJF. Last week, MJF bought tickets for the entire group as a way to celebrate his induction into the faction in AEW. Now, MJF defeated Chris Jericho at Full Gear for him and Wardlow to gain entry to the stable. Now, during the segment, Santana and Ortiz said they could take the party in Vegas to the next level, and suddenly we saw our first cameo, which is former WCW and TNA/Impact star Conan appearing. The fans then saw the entire group pile out of a limo with smoke billowing from it, so I think we know what that is intending, but I really enjoyed that because obviously we had history of Santana and Ortiz working with Conan in Impact as part of the stable LAX. It was a nice throwback to having Santana and Ortiz being in Impact and now keeping that sort of continuity over into AEW, so I really enjoyed that cameo. Now, after the former WCW and TNA star Conan made a cameo in part 1 of the Inner Circle's trip to Las Vegas, we saw another cameo in that former WWE superstar Hornswoggle, aka Swoggle, showed up later in the night as well. After a wild night, a dazed Chris Jericho and Santana stumbled through a hotel the next morning to hear what sounded like a crying baby in one of the hotel rooms. It was just one of a million Hangover references. This whole segment was a play on the Hangover movie in Las Vegas. So they hear a crying baby in one of the rooms. Chris Jericho opens the door to find Swoggle sitting on the floor in a diaper, by the way, and crying. Chris Jericho then yelled out, "Guys, we have a problem." As noted on Dynamite last night, Chris Jericho and Jake Hager will team up next week to face off SCU members Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels on Dynamite. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this whole segment was a play on the Hangover, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. What I do think is ironic is that I loved this segment. I loved the segments. I love this kind of stuff that Jericho has been doing in AEW. I enjoy the comedy stuff. I know that stuff isn't for everyone. I enjoyed this comedy stuff. I enjoyed this segment a million times more than I enjoyed the Dinner Debonair segment, but in reality, it's not going to get anywhere near as much attention as the Dinner Debonair segment. Why? Because it's nowhere near as divisive. It just isn't anywhere near as divisive. To get attention nowadays, not just in pro wrestling, but I guess just in everyday life, you need to be divisive. The world is divisive, and the segments last night, they weren't divisive. They were fun. And that's, I guess, almost the problem with it, is that it was fun. And it's not going to get the attention of Le Dinner Debonair because you're not going to have this pocket of people. Well, you are going to have this pocket of people that hate it because there's a pocket of people that hate everything. But I think universally this will be much more acclaimed and is much more acclaimed than Le Dinner Debonair segment because it was fun and it was still pro wrestling. It was still pro wrestling that it still told a story and it still made a relative sense when it comes to Jericho and MJF. And it wasn't as divisive as Le Dinner Debonair because it wasn't a musical or something completely out of the realm like we've seen before in pro wrestling. I thought it was fantastic. It's just ironic that being a brilliant segment nowadays isn't enough. You know, to get the attention like Le Dinner Debonair, to be trending for days, you have to annoy people. and you have to do things that get people riled up and angry to get attention, as opposed to doing good content, which is just so bizarre to me. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed this segment. I haven't been totally on board with the MJF Inner Circle stuff so far, like I said, because of Ladina Debonair, and I don't know, I just felt that it wasn't the home run that I thought it was going to be. But this segment I really did enjoy. Swoggle's everywhere at the moment as well. He wrestled on Saturday at Turning Point, and now he's in Vegas with the Inner Circle. Credit to him. Enjoyed the cameos of him and Conan and Elvis, and like I said, it was just a spoof on The Hangover, but you know what, I was totally for it. I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was a lot of fun. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the AEW news stories that we mentioned today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys and chatting about AEW here on the channel, so be sure to leave a comment and I'll respond to it. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.